it. All right, everybody, welcome to the Jimmy Chance Show. I'm Rob Cochran alongside Jacob Halleen, Marcus Miller, Connor Fitzharris. We're glad to have Fitz and Halleen back on the show, former hosts, graduated last year, moved on to bigger and better things. So welcome back to the show, guys. We're happy to have you on. First, we'll dive into it's conference championship week, and there's lots of controversy surrounding the playoff rankings, especially with Florida and the SEC upset that happened last week. I know a lot of people were upset with the committee over that. We've got some COVID cancellations, some COVID issues that aren't being talked about. And we've got a really good pick'em slate this week for you guys. So we're going to dive right into it. We've got a lot to talk about and not a lot of time to cover. So we'll dive right into the rankings. First question will go to Connor. The rankings they released on Tuesday, I watched the show, and I just couldn't understand why Florida only drops one spot after losing to LSU at home in the Swamp as 20-point favorites. What was your take? What was your guys' take? We'll start with Connor first. What were your guys' takes on the rankings this week?
Yeah, so I watched the show for the first time all year on Tuesday. I watched the whole thing. I was shocked. I think Florida shouldn't be in the top 10 anymore. I mean, they got embarrassed by a very poor LSU team. And to be honest with you, I really just don't get Iowa State or Texas A&M. I think those two teams are just kind of placeholders right now, unless Iowa State somehow goes off and beats Oklahoma this weekend. I think A&M, Iowa State, and Florida are way too high, and even Georgia. I think you can make a case for Georgia. I know they're a different team right now with JT Daniels, and their defense is finally healthy. But Georgia hasn't looked good at all, really all year as well, especially on offense. I think you can make a very good case for Cincinnati. Cincinnati has a right to be upset, and they deserve to be upset. I mean, they're sitting at 8-0. They haven't played in a couple weeks. I understand that, but that's not their fault. I mean, they're not punishing Ohio State sitting at number 4, who's 5-0. So I think Cincinnati should be maybe even at that 5 slot, if not the 6 slot. I think they definitely deserve to be in the playoff conversation. Even though Bama might beat them by 30 or 40, I think they deserve to be in the top 4. If Ohio State loses this weekend, or if the committee thinks 5 games is not enough, then I think Cincinnati should be in. Nothing really else that surprised me with the rankings. Maybe USC, at 13, sitting at 5-0. They've had some really good weeks, some really bad weeks. Almost lost to UCLA this past weekend. I think they're a better team than what people think. No really other shocks. I think BYU at 10-1 is very interesting still at 17. Lost to Coastal Carolina a couple weeks ago. I think BYU should be higher. I think they should be maybe around 13 or 12 with Coastal Carolina and USC. So no real huge issues besides A&M and Iowa State and Florida at 5, 6, and 7.
Halleen, what were your thoughts on this week's rankings?
Yeah, like Connor, this is kind of like the first week that I've really watched the show, the ranking show, and I would agree. I don't know. I feel like between 5 and 13, even 14 with all these teams, to me, there's not one of them that really stands out to me. I think I don't really have a problem necessarily with A&M being ranked 5th. They beat Florida this year. Their only loss, granted, was a big one, but it was to Alabama. I do have a problem with Iowa State being ranked that high, and Florida, I don't understand why they lose to a very bad LSU team and they drop 1 spot. I don't know if that has anything to do with, they're playing Alabama this weekend, we can't drop them too low. I don't know. But I think you look at teams like Cincinnati, and I'm sure you guys have talked about Indiana a lot. I don't know why those teams are so much lower than in Iowa State, who plays in a Big 12 that never seems to play well when it comes to the college football playoff. And they always seem to get a team in or ranked very high. And I think that the conference as a whole is, I wouldn't say overrated, but they just don't match up well against the team from the SEC or even the Big Ten, just for their style of play. So yeah, I don't understand Iowa being 6 and Florida being 7. I can understand why they have A&M at 5, But I think you look at teams like Cincinnati, Indiana, and even USC. I think that they have a case to be ranked higher.
Marcus, what did you think?
So I think in regards to Florida, I think the reason that they're still that high is because they're gonna have a real problem if they drop Florida like below Georgia, because then people would be like, well, Georgia lost to Florida or whatever. When in reality, they both should probably just be lower. I think the biggest problem with the college football playoff committee is like they can basically say whatever they want and then like just basically have different reasoning for like each team. Like they just like the reasoning, it varies. Like it feels like there's some teams who are like being penalized more for not blowing teams out than like actually losing. Like it's almost like if you lose a game, you're penalized less than like being a bad team by 3 or something. And I don't really get that. And in terms of like actual like problems I have with the rankings right now, I think they're like somewhat decent, but the biggest problem is Iowa State and Coastal having such a big gap, because Coastal basically has the exact same resume as Iowa State. They have 2 top 25 wins. They beat a team that beat Iowa State, and they're like 6 spots behind them. So I don't really get that. I think in terms of like the problem I have with it, that's probably the one main problem I have with it. But just in general, their reasoning for stuff just changes so much week to week, and it's so obviously like, I don't know, just I don't want to say it's all money based, but I feel like a lot of it's just money based.
Big thing now is like, what does the committee do with Clemson? If Clemson happens to lose again against Notre Dame tomorrow, like, do they keep? I mean, do you keep them in? I mean, because Dabo Swinney was like, well, I think we still deserve to be in, even though they haven't beaten the best team on their schedule twice. I don't know what the committee does with Clemson. Like, if Iowa State loses to Oklahoma this weekend, which I think will happen, I think Oklahoma will destroy Iowa State. Does the committee really think Texas A&M is going to move ahead against Clemson? Like, I don't know. Like, and that's kind of going like off Marcus said. Like, it seems like teams are being penalized like more for like winning than like actually like losing. Like Florida is a prime example of that. So if Clemson loses, like, okay, like the committee has no reason to drop them below 4. And in my opinion, A&M is very overrated. I do not think A&M is good at all. So I don't know. That 4 spot is going to be interesting if Clemson loses again. But I think the Irish are going to have their hands full tomorrow.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Marcus.
I mean, who are even the contenders for the 4th spot at this point? It's like Clemson, A&M, and then like maybe Iowa State / Oklahoma. Like that's probably
why I think Iowa State and A&M are just placeholders. Like I just don't understand how the committee can let them in unless Iowa State beats Oklahoma. Okay, then maybe we can talk about it. Jacob,
I think if you look at Iowa State, they also have 2 losses, and they'll have 2 much worse losses than Clemson. Granted, Clemson will have lost twice, and you could say, well, they don't deserve to be in the playoff again because they got 2 tries at Notre Dame. But if you're looking at a 2-loss Clemson team and a 2-loss Iowa State team, I mean, I know you shouldn't think of like the name on their jerseys, but is the committee really going to put if Iowa State were to beat Oklahoma? I just don't see them putting in Iowa State over 2-loss Clemson. Maybe they would have a tougher time between A&M and Clemson. I know A&M plays this weekend, but it's just a extra game basically. But I think Clemson will beat Notre Dame, but it'll be interesting.
I think if Clemson loses tomorrow to Notre Dame and Ohio State beats Northwestern soundly, like I think they will, despite the COVID issues that they're having, I think the committee would bump Ohio State up to 3 and drop Clemson to 4 and say like Clemson loses by 5 points or loses in overtime like they did earlier this season. I think the committee could justify saying Clemson lost 2 close games against the number 2 team in the nation. Like, I think they're deserving of this 4 spot. And then they could keep Clemson in as a 2-loss team despite not beating Notre Dame and not being a conference champion. I think they could find a way to pull some strings and justify Clemson being at the 4. And I think they would do that before they let a team like Texas A&M or Iowa State in. And when I agree with you, Connor, I just don't think either of those teams are playoff caliber teams. I have no idea why they're ranked that high.
I mean, can you imagine Iowa State playing Bama?
It would be a slaughter. It would be a slaughter. It would be 60-2.
I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa State snuck in if they beat Oklahoma, because I mean they've been overrating them since the first ranking came out. So it's
Brock
like
Purdy against Dylan Moses.
They obviously have something, like someone in Iowa State's got like Gary Barta's nudes or something. And they're like blackmailing because it's insane. And I mean, they're a good team, and like I'm happy that they're good because they're usually not good, but like with how they've been rated so far, I think there's a chance they would be the 4th team, honestly, if they beat Oklahoma and Clemson lost. Because the argument would be, well, Clemson has lost twice to a team that is in our top 4, so why would we give them a 3rd chance? You know, we can get a new
and the committee also values conference championships somewhat. So that's one of their criteria. So, I mean, and then the Marcus's point, like if Iowa State wins the Big 12 and Clemson somehow loses tomorrow, by their logic, I think Iowa State's got to be in because they're conference championship game. So, you know, who knows what the committee factors and how much they factor. This year has made it clear it's all subjective and nobody knows. So.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're still talking – granted, Louisiana is ranked now, but we're still talking about a team that lost 31-14 to a Louisiana team week 1. I don't think you can put a team like that in the playoffs.
I saw a tweet on Tuesday night. It was an IU fan. He's tweeted at Indiana football, schedule like Texas State next year and lose by 17 on purpose in week 1.
Yeah,
obviously it's a good thing.
I think another team that we talk a lot about on the show, but we haven't talked about so far, is this team right here, Indiana. I mean, right now it's their old mascot, Connor. I see that look on your face. I think that they're being kind of how would you say it, like shadow banned out of a New Year's Six bowl. I think that IU is on the outside looking in when it comes to a New Year's Six bowl, because I mean they beat Wisconsin in Camp Randall, and like they weren't rewarded for it. Like they upset them as double-digit underdogs, and weren't rewarded for it. And like they didn't move up. They just kind of stayed where they were. And so I think the committee really doesn't care about them because they don't bring a lot. So they aren't, I guess, motivated to put them in a New Year's Six bowl. And I think it's kind of a travesty because I think IU is a lot better than a lot of these other teams. Like I think IU could go toe to toe with a Georgia or an Iowa State. I think they could.
I mean, I think IU could beat Iowa State.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I really, with or without Penix, I think IU could win. And we don't have to touch on this too much, but the Big Ten really screwed IU. They're changing the rules for Ohio State, and yeah, I get that. They need to because of the money, but I mean, they screwed IU, and they kind of screwed Wisconsin too. Like if they would have changed the rule for Wisconsin a couple of weeks back, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered in hindsight because Wisconsin still lost to Northwestern, but it's unfair to them too. So the Big Ten, really screwed IU and Wisconsin. I think it's a tough draw for Tom Allen and those guys because IU should be in the Big Ten title game. So yeah.
In terms of the New Year's Six bowl, so I don't want to get too far into the scenarios here, but so basically, so Pac-12 has to get a spot. Basically, every Power 5 conference gets a spot. That could be included in the college football playoff. And then there's a group of 5 team that gets an automatic bid. So there's 6 at-larges. So a Pac-12, so basically you don't just have to be in the top 12 because a Pac-12 team could be like 15 and get in because they're the highest ranked Pac-12 team. And then this year, if Clemson makes the playoff, an ACC team has to play in the Orange Bowl. So that means North Carolina would play in the Orange Bowl, and that's a spot that's taken from the top 12. So basically for IU to get a New Year's Six bowl to be an at-large, they have to be 10th on Sunday. And so they either need probably Florida or the loser of Iowa State, Oklahoma to fall behind them. And to be quite honest, I think the only scenario where one of those teams falls behind them is if Oklahoma loses to Iowa State. Because with how high Iowa State and Florida are, I don't know if they're going to penalize them enough with having like a ranked loss or whatever. Like if Florida loses by 10 to Bama, there's no way they're dropping them behind IU. And if Iowa State loses by like 3 to Oklahoma, there's no way they're dropping them behind IU. So unless like those teams just get absolutely embarrassed, like it's going to be kind of tough, I think, for IU to get to 10, but they still have a chance, depending on who wins.
Oof, lots of scenarios and lots of different kind of like shuffleboard activity. But speaking of the Big Ten, Ohio State is dealing with some COVID issues. Like Halleen and I were talking about before the show, that aren't like that hasn't hit the airwaves yet. I mean, it's not being talked about, but behind the scenes, Ohio State is dealing with some positive COVID tests. In the case that IU, or not IU, but Ohio State has to cancel or they don't have enough players, what do you think would happen with Ohio State? Do you think that the committee would take a 5-0 team? Like, what do you think happens if Ohio State is not at full strength because of COVID?
Well, I think they're going to play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they don't play, that's a different discussion. If they don't play, I don't want to. The amount of chaos is going to happen on Sunday when they select the teams.
Kevin Warren is going to be crying if he gets to press. I think the only situation, even if Ohio State, doesn't play, I'm trying to think the only scenario that's going to let them out would be Florida beating Bama. I think, that would be one scenario where Ohio State could be left out. Maybe, Florida still has 2 losses, one to a very bad LSU team. But Florida beat Bama. They have the best win in the country. So I don't know. I don't think, obviously, Iowa State, I guess if Iowa State beats Oklahoma and Ohio State doesn't play, then what do you do? So I guess that's another situation where Ohio State could be left out if they don't play on Saturday. I still think Ohio State would be in over Iowa State, however that much outrage might be. If Iowa State beats Oklahoma and Ohio State doesn't play, I think Ohio State would still be in. I think Florida might be a different story, but again, that's unlikely to happen. Florida, I don't think is going to beat Bama. So some interesting scenarios, but I think it would still be difficult for, the College Football Playoff Committee to leave Ohio State out. Just in my opinion.
Yeah, there's so many, obviously, what ifs, and I think a big telling point is just how Ohio State has been in the top 4 from the beginning, when they were played much fewer games than everyone else. And obviously the committee thinks really highly of them. You have Ohio's, like, if you look at a team like USC, who's kind of in the same situation as Ohio State, like their conference has started much later. They played much fewer games, and like what's USC's 13, but they had Ohio State in the top 4. Like clearly they think that highly of Ohio State. And yeah, unless something crazy were to happen with Ohio State not playing, or if they do play, if they're down a bunch of starters and then somehow Northwestern pulls off the upset and they did have a loss, and then like Alabama or something like that were to lose, then I guess you could make a case for them not being in there. But at this point, I don't think there's any way that Ohio State won't be in the Final 4.
Now you made a good point about USC. Now, if USC wins tonight, the game is tonight at 8 p.m. on Fox, which I don't think they will. I think I'm going to take Oregon this week. I'm putting them on upset alert.
Oregon's
2 weeks in a row.
I'm just saying. But
okay. Have you picked against them the last 4 weeks, Rob?
Yeah, I've picked against USC every
UCLA.
I picked UCLA to win, and they killed me on that last drive. But I was so close to an upset win. But if USC does win, which they're projected to win, you have a 6-0 Pac-12 champion. Are you obligated to take that team over maybe Clemson if Clemson loses tomorrow or something like that?
The short answer is no. I just don't think USC. Rob, you raise a good point. USC 6-0.
Yeah, you're a 6-0 Power 5 conference champion, and you're faced with the possibility of taking a 2-loss Clemson team that's not a conference champion over a 6-0 Pac-12 conference champion. That is something that the committee might be faced with.
This might be some of my hatred toward USC, but I mean, I just don't think, USC only played 6 games. Number one, Clemson's played Notre Dame twice, and it's going to be a good game tomorrow, I think, between Notre Dame and Clemson. Let's hope. I don't think Notre Dame's going to blow them out tomorrow. I think that's the least likely scenario to happen. So if Notre Dame and Clemson play a close game and Clemson loses and USC wins, who cares? I think Clemson is still in over USC. And that's partly based off where the college football playoff rankings have them. USC's 13?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see them
Yeah.
jumping that many teams in one, even if just chaos, everything just weird happened this weekend. If they had them 7, maybe somewhere around there, 7 or 8, and then they won, and then Clemson were to lose, Ohio State didn't play or something weird like that, then I think I would not be surprised if that happened. But the fact that they're still 13th, I just don't see them jumping that many teams, no matter what happens.
Do you think they deserve to be ranked higher because they're undefeated and at the top of the Pac-12 right now, or do you think their ranking is fair right now?
I think they should be ranked a few spots, maybe 9 or 10. I don't think they should be in the same conversation where A&M and those, whether you think A&M and Iowa State should be ranked that high. I don't think USC should be that high, but I think they should be ranked a few spots higher.
USC Cincinnati. Sorry, Marcus, go ahead.
Sorry. There's this chart I saw today. It had all the different rankings and then the college football playoff rankings. So it had the AP, the coaches, and then the simulated BCS ranking. So it's someone took all the old computers and put it into some kind of ranking system. And I was expecting USC to be top 10, but apparently they're 12 in that too, and they're 13 and obviously the AP and coaches poll. So maybe I'm just missing something with them, but when you have Ohio State that high at 5-0, and even the simulated BCS one has it at number 3. When you have Ohio State that high or whatever at 3, I feel like USC has a gripe because it feels like they're being punished for not playing games when other teams aren't. And I mean, maybe they're actually just saying, well, USC hasn't really blown anyone out, so therefore, they're not as good. But I don't know. It feels like the main reason they're so low is because of the games they've played. If I was on the committee, I'd be arguing to put them at least 10th, probably. I'd probably have them above Florida, Georgia, and Oklahoma personally, maybe Iowa State too, just because all those teams have 2 losses. So I don't really get it. But in terms of if they actually will put them up that high, I don't think there's anywhere they're jumping from 13 to even top 6 next week.
It kind of reinforces what I said last week on the show, is that until we expand the college football playoff to 8 teams or 16 teams or whatever, it's kind of an invitational. I think the committee just kind of sits down at the beginning of the year and goes, okay, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, great. Okay, sweet. And then those teams kind of have to play their way out of the college football playoff instead of play in. And so I think that's kind of what happened this year is the committee sat down and looked and said, look, what 4 teams bring us, the biggest fan bases, the most eyes on television. And maybe, Ohio State's resume isn't that strong. I mean, their best win is IU. And I mean, I'm not trying to put down IU, but I'm just saying that Ohio State hasn't played a lot of, good games. And so I just think that like I said last week, it's an invitational. These teams have to play their way out, and teams like USC, teams like IU, teams like, those teams, it's kind of hard for them to play their way in. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys. I think it's kind of hypocritical of the committee, but I don't see USC jumping that many spots and overtaking Clemson.
Just real quick, I think it's more I agree with what you say, but I think it's more based on preseason rankings than anything else.
Yeah. I guess that's fair.
If you're ranked high in the preseason, you have to play your way out of it instead of someone jumping you.
Yeah.
I think if Alabama started the year number 1 and skated by and just barely like was escaping against bad teams, and they went like 11-1 or something. Let's say like, I don't know, IU or Iowa State went 11-1 and they're beating up on teams, and like they have one close loss. Like, I still think the committee would be like, well, Alabama started up there and they've only lost once, so maybe we should keep them up there. I just think a lot of it's preseason based.
Well, it's kind of like Penn State. Like Penn State for like the first 4 weeks of the season was ranked in the top 25, and they were 0-4. Like they hadn't won a game yet, and it was all just off of preseason rankings. And so I think preseason rankings way too much on a team's like worth to the committee and to the AP poll, when like in reality, like I mean, preseason rankings really don't mean anything because they haven't even stepped foot on the field yet. And so I think like Penn State, like they were 0-4, but they were still like 23rd in the nation because they were ranked so high to start the year.
That's kind of, as far as like Indiana, like I feel like they're kind of like in a weird situation because, I mean, you go start the season, you beat Penn State, who's, I forgot what Penn State was ranked at the
8,
time.
I think
8. Yeah, you beat a top 10 team. And now then you destroy Michigan team, who it's Michigan. But, I mean, IU typically doesn't beat Michigan, even if everyone knows Michigan is not good this year. And then you beat a Wisconsin team who now Wisconsin's like under 500. And it's just it's not to take anything away from in Indiana, but it's just, well, how do you value those wins when a lot of that was Penn State preseason ranked number 8, and then they just have a really bad year. In Wisconsin, they start out great, then they had their COVID issues, and now they're 2-3 or whatever they are. It's kind of hard to evaluate. I'm like, those are great wins, but it's hard to evaluate like those wins, I guess, compared to other teams who have beaten teams that were ranked and are still ranked.
I think the thing that's keeping them in particularly in the AP poll and the coaches poll, I think the thing that's keeping them at 7 right now, I think it's all just based off the Ohio State loss, in all honesty. Because like it just seems odd. Like if you're gonna have Ohio State at 4, then you should probably have a team that has 1 loss and to them and only lost by 7 with a chance to tie the game on the last possession. You should probably have them up pretty high. And I feel like if Ohio State like beat them by a little bit more, or maybe Ohio State wasn't as good as we thought, like I don't think anyone would be looking at IU as a top 10 team. I think that's like what all their cred, I guess, is coming from. Is I think people have kind of moved on from the Penn State and Michigan wins, honestly, which I don't know if it's fair or not, but I think people kind of recognize them as being bad.
All right. Are you guys ready to move into the pick'em? All right. So we'll start off with a game tonight, 7:30 on ESPN. It is the MAC championship. It is one we all love and adore. MACtion is back. Ball State versus Buffalo. I know Ball State, it's like 30 minutes from us in Muncie. I'm going to take Buffalo in this one. I think Buffalo's offense is just a juggernaut. I mean, if you look at I think SP Plus and you look at FEI rankings, Buffalo's offense is up near the top, like near Clemson and stuff. Like it's one of in terms of points per drive and stuff like that. And some of the advanced metrics, it's a juggernaut of an offense. I mean, it put up like 70 points against Bowling Green or something like that. But I just think it's too good for Ball State to contain. I think Ball State is a good team, and I think in any other year they probably have a really good shot at winning the MAC. But I like Buffalo I don't think they'll roll Ball State, but I think their offense is good enough to keep pace ahead of Ball State.
Well, how can you pick against Ball State from Muncie, Indiana, man? Come on, you cannot pick against the Cardinals. Well, I'm just not looking at the line. It's 13, Buffalo. I'm gonna go with Ball State. Why not? I think it's a football game. I think they're the better football team.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a lot about Buffalo's offense. I don't care about that. I think Ball State's got one of the best defenses in the country. I like Ball State by a couple touchdowns.
Okay.
Chirp, chirp.
Are we talking Ball State in the college football playoff ?
We should be.
People are asking.
People are asking. I mean,
has Ball State lost a game?
I think they're one loss. One loss. They could be one loss conference champions. I mean, that's. Let me look. Hang on. I mean, we're looking at
probably Buffalo.
we're looking at a possible one-loss conference champion. I mean, Ball State.
Yeah. Wait. Why isn't Buffalo or Ball State ranked?
Buffalo is.
Buffalo is, I think.
Oh, Buffalo's ranked.
Ball State lost.
They are the AP.
Ball State lost to Miami of Ohio by a touchdown the first game of the year.
Oh, give me Ball State.
Okay.
Well, Buffalo beat Miami of Ohio 42-10. So
Ball State. It doesn't change my answer.
Hey, I'm taking Ball State because of the game last week. That proves to me they're a team of destiny. The way that game ended, them getting the win in that proves to me that they're a team of destiny. So they're gonna win out here, and they're gonna shock the world and beat Buffalo.
Halleen, you've got Ball State or Buffalo?
I'm going Buffalo. I actually charted their game against Kent State when they put up 70, and their running back Jarrett Patterson put up a nice 409 rushing yards with 8 touchdowns that game. And he's also had a 300-yard rushing game as well. So, yeah, I'm going with Buffalo in Khalil Mack's alma mater.
Nice. And I know I forgot to mention this at the start of the show, but our third co-host, our better third, Jack Miller, is not joining us this week. He's in Colorado skiing in the mountains, so he's off doing better things besides talking about Ball State in the college football playoff. But next game we'll go to Cincinnati. Number 23 Tulsa takes on number 9 Cincinnati. Cincinnati has one last game to kind of prove their worth, I guess, to the committee. They're looking to cap off an undefeated season or undefeated regular season. I think Cincy just has more to play for. I think they're the better team, and that's why I'm going to roll with Cincy here. I think their defense is one of the best in the country. I mean, the metrics might not back it, but I just think that they have a really good, solid defense. So I like Cincy to win this one by a pretty good margin.
I see Tulsa has only lost one game this year. That was Oklahoma State in the first game of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be a close game. I think Tulsa's going to cover. I see it's the spread is 13. I think they're definitely going to cover that. But I think in the end, Cincinnati's going to win a close game. They're going to kick a game-winning field goal at the end of the game, and I think Cincy's going to win.
All right. Halleen, who you got?
Yeah, I got the Bearcats winning this game. I haven't watched much of either team, but both. I think Cincinnati's got more to play for. I think they'll win by 2 scores.
Perfect.
I'm disappointed I haven't watched more of Cincinnati, honestly, because everyone I know or follow that knows a lot about college football is really hyping them up this year. And they're probably a little mad that they're ranked 9th. So I think they're gonna just kick Tulsa's tail and win by 21 plus.
You know what they say, hell hath no fury like a Cincinnati Bearcat scorned. But
really?
Yeah.
Never heard that one before.
People are saying.
What they say.
It's what they say. Next game, it's a service academy game, one that we all love. I know we picked Army Navy last week, and that game went under by $1 billion. I think, what was it, 15-0?
15-0.
Yeah. Yep. That was beautiful. What a beautiful football game. There was fog. There was triple option offenses. I mean, it was just beautiful football. That the president was there. I mean, it was just perfect. So Air Force Army, I'm going to take Air Force. I think Air Force's offense is a little bit more potent than Army's. Air Force rolled Navy 40-7 or something like that, or 40. I mean, they just put 40 points on Navy. So I like Air Force to win this one pretty comfortably. I think their defense is also pretty solid. And I mean, I know a kid that plays for Air Force, so I mean, you got connections, you got to pull for Air Force. So I'm taking Air Force.
I've got a friend who plays on Air Force too, but that doesn't change my mind. I'm taking Army by 1 trillion. Army is going to murder Air Force. Air Force only played 5 games all year, and Army's played 10. So I think that plays a huge factor in this game. I don't think Air Force stands a chance. I know Air Force is favored in the game. I don't care. Army's gonna
Totally.
beat the doors off them. Yeah.
All right,
Who
Yeah,
Halleen,
fights in the
I-
trenches? Oh, sorry. Go.
Go.
I
All right.
go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say I'm going with Army as well. Maybe not by a trillion, but I'd say by a billion. And I'm just looking at their schedule this year. Their losses were to Tulane, and then they played Cincinnati and they lost 24-10, which I know Army has the ball like 90% of the game, so it's probably why it's closer than it was. But that's a pretty good loss if you ask me. So I'm going with the Black Knights.
Yeah. You know who fights in the trenches in wars? Not pilots. Army is gonna win the battle in the trenches, and they're gonna win this one easily.
all right. So you three have Army, and I've got Air Force. All right, interesting. I was expecting a lock unity with Air Force, but I guess not. I think you think you know a guy, but next we'll go to the Pac-12 championship, which is tonight on USC or on not on USC on Fox. I will be tuned into this game for sure. It is Oregon versus number 13 USC. I know we were talking about earlier on the show. This has some playoff implications. Possibly USC is trying to make a good resume for a bowl game to the committee. I think my gut tells me that USC has more to play for, but then you also look at things that USC can't control off of the field in terms of USC was preparing to play, was it Washington, I think, before? Yeah, they were preparing to play Washington, and then Washington got kicked out because they had COVID, and then now they're preparing to play Oregon. And so USC is preparing to play 2 games. USC they haven't won a game, I think, by more than like 10 points all year. So that like every game who did they
killed Wazoo.
They did?
They were up like 28-0 on them in the first quarter a
Okay.
couple weeks ago.
But the last few games that they've played, they beat Arizona by 1 point on a last second touchdown, and Arizona got blown out by 70 points the other week.
Kevin Sumlin though, come on, Kevin Sumlin's a great coach. I love Kevin Sumlin.
They just got blown out. So I also like Oregon's defense. Oregon's defense is pretty good, and I think Oregon has the personnel to stop USC's rush attack. I'm kind of conflicted on this. I'm like 50-50, so I kind of want to hear what you guys are leaning towards.
I've got a couple of strong disagreements here.
Okay.
Well, I think I wouldn't say this game has playoff implications. It definitely has New Year's Six implications.
Yeah. But that's kind of what I meant. Yeah.
I mean, Oregon's not Bama, so yeah. I don't think USC is jumping a whole lot. But yeah, I do agree with you, Rob. This game could potentially impact the Rose Bowl and whatnot. But Oregon's defense I don't think is that great. I mean, they gave up 38 points to freaking Oregon State. So I mean, 41 points, and they lost the game. So I know the game was in the fog. It was weird, but I think USC is a decent team. I think, we talked about the ranking earlier. I think they're probably around the top 10 ranking. I think they're going to beat Oregon. I just think Oregon lost all faith when they lost to Oregon State, huge rivalry. So, and then they lost to Cal last week. So, or 2 weeks ago. So I don't think Oregon has much to play for. And Rob, like you said, USC has, the Rose Bowl to play for. So I think USC wins pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm going USC too. I was seeing Oregon, you're looking at those 2 losses against Oregon State and Cal. And then, yeah, just like Connor said, USC has a lot more to play for. Oregon's probably like, hey, we're in the Pac-12 championship. Cool. In USC, I think USC's I think they're better. I know they're 5-0, but they haven't looked that great in those games. I think they're probably better than they've looked in a couple of those games. They're only favored by 3, so I think it'll be a close game. But I'm going with USC in this one.
Marcus, who you got?
I have USC written down, but I don't know how well I feel about it. I think I'm gonna stay with USC, but I don't think this game is gonna be like by any means a blowout. I think if anything, Oregon's going to have a little bit more extra motivation just to kind of salvage their season a little bit. because I mean, pretty bad start, or not horrible start, but 2-2, and you win the last 2 games and win win in quotations the Pac-12. I don't know. I think they could. So I think it's gonna be close, but I think USC is probably gonna win a close game because obviously they win in a close game every week. It seems like.
Yeah, I think you guys have convinced me. I think USC just has more to play for, and I think that's something that a spread can't account for, is motivation. So I'll go USC here. Just kind of play it safe, pick the favorite. Next up, we've got a game that we tried to get into. Thank you, Marcus, for doing that, for putting the rankings in. So I'll explain what I was up to this week. I was sitting at dinner on Sunday night, and I had this brilliant idea, probably the best idea I've had in years. And I said, what if we applied for media credentials to the Big Ten championship game using our show, because we're technically like a registered media entity, because we're with WTUR. And so I was like, we could totally get into the Big Ten game. And so I went on and I filled out the application. I said, like, this is Marcus Miller, Jack Miller, Rob Cochran. And I filled out the application, sent it in, and I got the email Tuesday that it had been denied. So we are not getting into the Big Ten championship game.
Could have told you that one.
Yeah, but we held out hope, and we crossed our fingers. But we will not be on the sidelines on tomorrow. But we have number 14 Northwestern versus number 4 Ohio State. I think Ohio State, despite its COVID problems, I guess, I think OSU wins this one pretty handedly. They need to make a pretty strong statement to the playoff committee and basically to the country. And I think they roll Northwestern here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Ohio State, if they lose, they're definitely done. I think Justin Fields is going to make sure that does not happen at all. So I think they're going to roll Northwestern. A part of me thinks that this could be a close game just because Northwestern has such a solid defense, and they actually have a decent offense too with Peyton Ramsey. I think this could be a closer game than what people think, but I think in the end, with Ohio State is going to win by 14, 17 points, and I think Ohio State's going to win and be in the playoff. So I'm cheering for a close game. Obviously, it would be a chaos if Northwestern happened to win this game, which would be really cool. But I think Ohio State's going to win big.
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed that Northwestern lost to Michigan State, because I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State, but that would have been something, because the winner of that game probably would have made the college football playoff if you had 2 undefeated Big Ten teams. But I'm going with Ohio State. I think it'll be close to, or closer. I think this spread's like 18.5. Maybe Ohio State will still cover. But I think it'll be similar to when they played a couple years ago in the Big Ten championship game. And I believe Northwestern, it was a 1-score game early in the third quarter. I think they were down double digits, and then they kind of made it interesting in the third, and then Ohio State just blew it open. So I think it'll be close for a while. Northwestern plays good defense, and they run the ball, so they'll probably try to control the clock. But I think Ohio State will end up winning big.
Yeah, I think Ohio State's gonna win this game pretty. I think I'm thinking they're gonna blow them out. I think Ohio State's pretty motivated to prove that they belong. And I don't think the COVID issues really mattered, because they just were missing half their team against Michigan State and just absolutely just demolished them. And the formula to being Ohio State, I believe, from what we've seen this year, is attack the edge of their defense, because that's what IU did. Mm-hmm. Just went after their corners. So you got to have speed, and you got to have really good athletes on offense, I think, to beat them. Because I don't think it doesn't really matter how good a Big Ten defense is. A Big Ten defense is probably not slowing down Ohio State. So I feel like the formula for beating them is just speed on the perimeter, and I don't think Northwestern really has that. And I don't think this game is going to be super close. I think Northwestern's defense might make it kind of interesting in the first half, but I think it's going to be like a 25, 28, 30-point game by the end of it.
I think it would be interesting because like Ohio State, like is dealing with COVID issues and like, do they matter? Do they not matter? But I would love to see after Kevin Warren has pulled out every trick in the bag to put Ohio State in this game, Northwestern like wins this game on a last second field goal and kicks Ohio State out of the playoff. Like I would just love, I would pay an insane amount of money to see Kevin Warren's reaction if Ohio State lost this game, just because of everything that him and his office have done to pamper to Ohio State. But yeah, I would just love to see his face. But we'll go to number 10 Oklahoma versus number 6 Iowa State, another top 10 matchup. I kind of went back and forth on this game all week. I've been kind of keeping track of the spread, kind of looking at the number. It started at like 4.5. Now it's up to 6, and there's a lot of money coming in on Iowa State now. And so there's a lot of like back and forth, not a lot of clarity on who's going to win this game. I know Iowa State is probably more motivated to win this game because if they win, they have a better shot at getting into the playoff. Granted, like someone like Clemson loses, but who are you guys taking? Because I'm kind of on the fence.
I'm taking Oklahoma. I think this is going to be, not a great game. I know Iowa State, has played very well the last few weeks, blowing out basically everybody that they've seen. I think Oklahoma's playing some of the best football in the country, though. Obviously, their defense still is, shaky, as always with any Big 12 defense. But yeah, I think Oklahoma is going to beat them pretty bad this weekend and be Big 12 champs. Interesting that a lot of money is coming in on Iowa State. I would not have guessed that at all. I think I just don't see the drag for Iowa State. I just don't see it. I don't think Brock Purdy's a great quarterback. And I think Oklahoma's going to win the game. So.
Yeah, I'm going to Oklahoma too. They played each other earlier in the year. And Iowa State actually won 37-30. And they're both playing well right now. I think Oklahoma's playing a little better. But I think just Oklahoma, they've been in this game however many years now in a row. And yeah, I don't trust Brock Purdy to make big plays at the end of the game. So I think it'll be pretty close. And I think it'll be kind of low scoring, like maybe in the upper 20s. But I'm going with the Sooners.
Marcus, who you got?
Yeah, I'm also going with Oklahoma. I think Iowa State's a little bit better than what Fitz said. No offense. I think Iowa State's a little bit better than that. But it's hard to beat a team like Oklahoma twice just because they're such a good offensive, system that I feel like they're going to find a way to attack Iowa State better this time because they have them on film for a whole game. So I just think Oklahoma's offense is going to get going and not make this like a blowout, but I'd be pretty surprised if Iowa State can just keep up with Oklahoma's punches this game. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma.
I think I'm gonna pick Oklahoma to win, but I think I was looking at the spread and it's up to 6 now. When Iowa State played Oklahoma and won outright, it was 7.5. And so, it's at 6 right now. It was up from 4.5. So I think that Iowa State keeps it close, but I think Oklahoma pulls it out. I think Oklahoma's offense is just at too high of a operating speed for Iowa State to keep up with. So I'm going to take Oklahoma. Next, we go to the SEC, where Alabama is playing the fraudsters of number 7 Florida. I'm going to take Alabama. I'm going to take Alabama by a trillion points. I want you to take 100 and then multiply it by 1 billion and then multiply that number by 1 billion. And then that's how many points Alabama is going to beat Florida by, because I just don't think Florida, I think they're supposedly resting their players and then they lose to LSU. And so I just think Alabama just blows Florida out of the water. I don't think Florida is the number 7 team in the nation. I think they're only this high because they want to make Alabama's win look better. So I'm going to take Alabama by a gazillion points.
Did you see what Dan Mullen said? I think it was yesterday.
I did not. What did he say?
Yeah.
He was asked if Florida has a chance at the college football playoff still because they're still ranked 7th, and he was like, "Yeah, we can talk about it after we beat Bama this weekend."
No.
Oh
Oh
my
my.
That's what Dan Mullen said.
He just needs to shut up and just like prepare for the game.
Yeah, and he said the whole thing with the shoe incident, basically like calling it like, "Oh, he didn't throw the shoe." Like, okay,
he did.
good to know. But I think this is going to be a closer game than you think, Rob. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. There's going to be points everywhere. Bama, people have been ragging on Bama's defense. I think their defense is just fine. I think by far and away the best team in the country. Sure, they've let up a couple, huge points here and there, but I think they're a very solid defense. So I don't really get that part. But I think Bama's going to win. I think they'll win by, a touchdown or 2, no more than that. But, I mean, listen, I think Trask is still a good quarterback. So I think he'll play well against Bama, and if Pitts can still get involved, I think it's going to be a close game. So I think Bama's going to win, but it's going to be a close game, I think.
Yeah, I'm going with Alabama. I was listening to my friends on First Take this morning, and Stephen A., the biggest Bama fan I know, says that they were going to take them to the woodshedder and beat them by 40, and they had Tim Tebow on there, and a shocker, but he didn't pick Florida to win, but he thought that they would lose a close game. I'm kind of leaning towards Connor. I think that I'm picking Bama, but I think that Florida will make it a game, and I think almost in a way them losing to LSU and just everyone writing them off. I don't know why I feel like that. I think they're still a very good team, and I think that as good as Alabama is, I think, I don't know. I just think Florida will put up a fight, and I think that maybe a 38 to 28 game, somewhere around there. I think Bama will win, but I don't think it'll be more by 10 or 14 points.
I think Florida's got a path to victory here, in all honesty. I think Alabama's going to win. But Alabama is the best passing team they've played. And they've only really played, I would say, look at their schedule, 1 or 2 good passing offenses. The best they've played is Ole Miss. And we all remember that Ole Miss game was just nuts. Back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
No, Alabama's defense has probably gotten better since then. But Florida's offense is probably the best passing offense they're going to play since that Ole Miss game. So I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think it could be. I don't think it's going to be, though, just because, there's probably some stuff on tape there. And, Alabama hasn't handled, really good passing teams that well. Granted, they've only played 1, but yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I still think Alabama's going to win.
Perfect. I also think it's going to be interesting because a lot of Florida's offense is through Pitts. It's through that Kyle to Kyle connection. So I think if Alabama puts someone on Kyle Pitts, I think it'll be interesting to see how Florida adjusts. If they double team or something like that, it'll be interesting to see how they adjust. That game's tomorrow. I think it's at 8 on CBS. Is that correct? Are they the primetime game? Yeah. Okay. And then next we move on to a game, possibly the game of the week. It is our Jimmy Chance Show game of the week. It is number 3 Clemson versus the number 2 Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. I'm going to ride with the Irish here. I cannot pick against the Irish. To pick against the Irish is to go against the will of God. I am picking Notre Dame to win this game.
Wow, pretty strong words there, though. But I love the enthusiasm for Notre Dame. Listen, I think it's going to be a very good game. I think there are going to be 2 possible outcomes here. I think it's going to be a very, very close game down to the wire, or Clemson's going to beat them pretty good. But Clemson missed a lot of defensive players. They had that they didn't have in South Bend, missing a couple of defensive linemen. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was not there. Notre Dame played, pretty good. They probably played, about as good as they could play, minus a couple of plays. The fumble by Book in the end zone was almost a disaster.
Oh,
I
my
had a heart attack when that happened. I think it's going to be a close game. I picked Notre Dame to win in my article, so I will stick with that. I think, they're one of the best teams, on both sides of the football. Their defense has been extraordinary. The only thing that concerns me is their defensive backs. They have a very good safety in Kyle Hamilton. Sean Crawford, is very good as well, but Hamilton is one of the best safeties in the country. Their cornerbacks struggled against Clemson, and that's what concerns me. If you got guys like Amari Rogers and I forget their other receiver name, Cornell something, if they keep running seam routes down the sideline, it's going to be tough because Hamilton's going to be on one side of the ball, but Sean Crawford and Bracey, might be on another side of the ball. It's going to be a struggle. So, Lawrence, obviously a very talented quarterback as well. I'm more concerned with his running threat.
Mm-hmm.
He is a runner. I mean, with those read options, I think Notre Dame is they're gonna be forced to keep a spy on him, usually at all times, which concerns me because Notre Dame never does well defensively, against a running quarterback. See Watson a couple of years ago against Notre Dame in the rainstorm. I mean, it was bad. So I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Notre Dame's offense, that they have enough weapons to win the game. Kyron Williams is going to be a factor, I think, and their offensive line is another huge concern for Notre Dame this week. They've been banged up the last 2 or 3 weeks since Boston College, so their offensive line cannot handle it. We saw in 2018 what Clemson can do, and Notre Dame just gets overpowered by their defensive line. So I'm sticking with Notre Dame. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think if their secondary can play well, that's going to be the biggest factor. So I'm picking the Irish by 4.
I'm going with Clemson, and I actually think they're going to win by a lot. I think that, I've been very impressed by Notre Dame this year. I didn't think that they would be this good. And I think, just Clemson their backs are up against the wall a little more right now than Notre Dame. They will have a tougher time of being in the playoff if they were to lose than Notre Dame, in my opinion, unless it was a blowout one way or the other. So I just think their backs are up against the wall a little more. And I think that if you look at their last game against Notre Dame, even though they lost, they lost on the road, which I know there are that many fans there, but it's still, you're going into South Bend on Saturday night. You're without your star quarterback. You're starting a true freshman who is probably going to be a very good quarterback in the next few years, but it was his only second career start, I believe. And then you're missing some key defenders, and I just think all those combined, and then they still took them to overtime and lost a close game. I think with Lawrence back and them being healthy and just a little more to play for, I think that they're going to win by a few touchdowns, in my opinion.
I have went back and forth. I think I'm going to go with Clemson, but Notre Dame's probably feeling a little disrespected right now, and I think this pains me to say, but I think they're better than what people are still giving them credit for. They just control games. Their offensive line, their defensive line, they just control games. And the 2018 team that beat Notre Dame, the Clemson team, that team was just loaded on defense. Guys like Isaiah Simmons, Christian Wilkins, who else? The Mullen guy who plays for the Raiders now.
They had 3 top 10 defensive line picks.
Farrell,
yeah.
That defense was insane. I think Clemson's defense has taken a step back a little bit since that team. I think this is going to be pretty high scoring again. I think Clemson is just going to lean on Trevor Lawrence and Etienne's running ability. Because I don't think Notre Dame will be able to just quite stack the box as much as they did against them earlier in the year. Because, that was basically just let DJ beat us. If he beats us, he beats us. So I'm not sure if Notre Dame's going to be able to do that as much. So I think it's going to be close just because I think Notre Dame's a really good team. But I feel like I just trust Trevor Lawrence a little bit more down the stretch of a close game than I do in book at this point. So give me Clemson in a close one.
Perfect. Well, that wraps up the pick'em. Do you guys have any last thoughts? Any last words you guys want to throw in before we do the outro?
Let's do final 4 picks. Let's see
Yeah.
who's going to be in the playoff.
Absolutely.
I'll start. I'll go in order. I'll go Bama 1. Notre Dame 2. It's going to be interesting if Notre Dame, if they beat Clemson again, does the committee bump them up to 1 or 2? It's going to be a toss-up, but I think, Bama beating Florida is enough for them to stay at 1. So Bama, Notre Dame, Ohio State at 3. I think they're going to move up if they beat Northwestern and Clemson loses. And then Clemson at 4. I think the only scenario Clemson being knocked out is if they lose tomorrow and Iowa State beats Oklahoma. Then there could be a discussion of who is 4.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've got Bama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson.
For me, I've got Bama 1, Clemson 2, Ohio State 3, Notre Dame 4.
Yeah, same as Halleen. I will say this. I think if Clemson loses, I think A&M would squeak into the 4th spot. Just because they've been at 5 all year.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can't have them at 5 all year and then have one of your top 4 teams like lose another game and not bump the number 5 team up. But obviously it's the committee, so I don't know. But I think Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame will be the top 4. Though I would be interested to see if they keep Notre Dame above Ohio State. I think if it's close, I think they might keep Notre Dame at 3 if Clemson wins.
You think they'd have them play a third time?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
I don't know why. I feel like they just want to do that, whether it's because once you get to the top 4, I feel like it's all just like about matchups. And if they've seen them play twice already, I would think that they would want to see like the Notre Dame play Alabama, but who knows what goes on in their heads.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're probably right. I don't think people would really want to watch Notre Dame Clemson a third time unless it's a really good game, and then maybe they're like, well, let's do part 3. That's out of 3.
The trilogy.
If Notre Dame is at 4 and Bama is at 1, and that's the final ranking, if Bama gets Waddle back, oh my goodness, I cannot.
Are they supposed to?
Waddle practice.
Yeah, he's supposedly supposed to come back.
Wait, what? Oh,
yes.
I thought he was done.
So he's not playing this week, but they said he's gonna be ready by New Year's.
Oh, I thought he was done. Man, they're nuts.
If
they have Waddle back,
Mechie, it's over.
It's done. It's done. Yeah.
Throw 4 verts all day against.
I don't think Bama's. I don't know who's beating Bama this year. I think Ohio State actually has the best chance because I think they can keep up with them the best.
If that happens, then Brian Kelly's going to have to try more to boycott than just not letting their families come to the game.
He's trying to lead the guy of the game.
Like
they're going to
probably just like Sarkisian's probably just in Mac Jones' helmet, like run the touchdown play, like just score a touchdown right here. I'm like, all right, we'll score a touchdown.
They're going to put Notre Dame at 4, and then Notre Dame is going to opt out of the college football playoff just because of family issues or something, and they're just going to bow out of playing Alabama. But I think that if Notre Dame loses tomorrow, which I'm worried they might, I think that they would be 4 in that case. That would be my worst fear. But I think I hope they win. I think that people are undervaluing Notre Dame. So I think they keep it close. And I mean, if you think about it, like Clemson, when they were missing, I think their defensive injuries that they had in that game made more of an impact than Trevor being out. Because if you remember the game, like if you were watching it, like that DJ kid, he can play. Like he went out there and he played like lights out. Like he threw for 400 yards. He ran all over him. He was making really good throws. And so it's not like I was playing quarterback for Clemson. It's not like it was some scrub. Like they had a really good quarterback. He put up like a good QBR. So I think their defensive injuries mattered a little bit more. But like, is it 4 points? Is it 7 points worth of injuries? I don't know. So I think Notre Dame keeps it close, and I think if they win, they stay at 2, and I think Clemson would drop to 4. But I would say it's dependent on that Clemson Notre Dame game.
So this doesn't matter now because this scenario is over with. But if Florida had beaten LSU and then they beat Bama, and then let's say Clemson beat Notre Dame like on a close game, who gets left out in that scenario?
Oh man.
This is always the one that like I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of happy. I'm happy Florida lost because I think if they had won and then beaten Bama, like the world would have burned. Like
I think it would have been in no order. It would have been Bama, Florida, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State's left out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think especially if Northwestern gave them a game. I think if Ohio State then blew out Northwestern, ugh, I actually think in that scenario,
Bama's out.
Kicked
I
out.
think Notre Dame would be honestly.
As long as like Notre Dame didn't lose like 50-0, like then I don't think you could put Notre Dame. Like I think you would have like this is so hypothetical, but then you'd have Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, and Clemson. But if Notre Dame were to play a competitive game at least, even if they lost by double digits, you'd have to leave them in. And then I don't think you could leave Florida out. So then you're left with Ohio State, who undefeated, but they've only played 6 games. I mean, sorry, but you have to play a few more games than that, I feel like. In that
I think that's
scenario.
what I would do if I was on the committee, but I could just 100% see the committee being like, well, Clemson didn't have Trevor Lawrence, so Notre Dame's not very good. Let's kick them out.
Yeah.
You know, I think that would be like what they would do because of the committee, and they'll say something stupid if it means they get the 4 teams they want. So,
All right. What'd you say, Connor?
They would just say Notre Dame is not good. They're out.
Yeah, they're out.
They would say.
That's their
I
justification
said
for it.
so.
Notre Dame bad. You're gone. Any other last thoughts, last words? No? Well, yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming back on the show. I know it's been a while since we've seen you guys and talked to you guys. So it was good to see you guys again, and I know you guys are doing well post-graduation. So, yeah, thank you guys for coming back on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We should do a final bowl rundown.
Yeah.
Picking all of the bowls.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks for inviting us, and yeah, maybe we could do this again sometime.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you guys back on for our massive bowl episode that we do every year. So yeah, thank you guys for coming back on the show. Thank you guys everyone for tuning in. We'll be back probably next week with our bowl episode. You can follow us on Twitter at Jimmy Chance Show. I know we'll be tweeting out our picks, and we'll be tweeting out updates as the weekend goes along. So be sure to follow us. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, you stay classy.
Go Ball State.
Go Ball State.